The narrative outside of New York City, when you're talking about the New York Knicks, is that they are average and they are overrated. So Jonathan Macri of Knicks Film School is on the fight back against that narrative after the Knicks come from behind OT win Sunday night against the Jimmy Butlerless Heat. J-Mac, what's going on, my man?
Not much. You put me on the spot. Now I gotta come and bring the defense of this basketball team, which it's funny, you talk about how other fans perceive the Knicks and things that they're saying about the Knicks this season. I think a lot of Knicks fans are frustrated with this team and how they've kind of made a lot of these games more interesting than they should be. Obviously, haven't shown up against some of the better teams, and yet you look at their record. 40 and 20. This team's been around for 78 years before this. They've only started that well or better 8 times previously. So
Okay.
it's weird. We're kind of in uncharted territory, and yet at the same time, you could argue that the team is underwhelming.
All right, well, get ready to play some defense because at least somebody on that team is playing defense. Last night, down 19 at one point. They closed out the fourth with a 15-5 run. They got it done in overtime, but let's be honest, J-Mag, Miami ain't a powerhouse. So would you call this an impressive win, or do the Knicks need to stop playing with their food?
Can I pick both? Because I think it's a little bit of column A and a little bit of column B. Yeah, they do need to stop playing with their food, and I think it comes back to the starting lineup. They are not getting off to good starts in these games. I mean, this starting five has played more minutes than any other five-man unit in basketball, and they were kind of a middling group for the majority of the season, and yet you look ever since the Laker game where OG Anunoby got injured, he went down. Since they've been back since that game together, they're giving up 132.6 points per 100 possessions. That's via pivot fade. That is an atrocious number, and is not tenable at all. And you just see them together. They don't have the connectivity on the defensive end, and the offense is just as underwhelming. That said, I thought major bright spot from last night, OG Anunoby, who is a guy who was obviously brought here and then signed to this big contract in large part because of how he can impact the game defensively. He was the biggest reason for the turnaround last night. He put his fingerprints all over that game, made Miami feel him in ways that I don't think opponents have quite felt him this year. We know that he's capable of that. So I think if you are looking forward and looking for reasons to be encouraged, what you saw from OG Anunoby last night is probably the biggest reason.
But when we talk about this starting lineup, the big hype or the big draw about this team coming into the season was, oh, it's the Villanova Knicks. The Villanova Knicks.
Yeah.
Mikal Bridges only played 28 minutes last night. He was only what, 5 points off of 2 for 11 shooting. This
211,
man
yeah.
has been very inconsistent at times offensively throughout the season. You mentioned the starting lineup. Does Mikal Bridges stay in your starting lineup if you're Tibbs?
If I'm Tibbs, that's a scary proposition. I think he does for the rest of this season. Because for me, like, look, this is the first year that they have this group together with Karl Anthony Towns, obviously at the five. I mean, I know Mitch is back. My guess is that Cat is going to remain at the five in the starting lineup for the rest of the season. It's an information gathering season for me if I'm Tom Thibodeau. Doesn't mean they're not competing for a title. Doesn't mean that they can't beat anyone out there, despite what they've shown against some of these very good teams. But I want to see this thing out through at least 82 games and probably through the playoffs. And then, you reassess during the summertime. That said, and I'm obviously not the first person to quote these numbers, if you put Deuce McBride in place of Mikal Bridges with the other four starters, this is via cleaning the glass. They're outscoring teams by 46.6 points per 100 possessions. Now, that's in a small sample size, 184 or 154, excuse me, possessions. That's not a lot of time, to be very clear. But those are also some outstanding numbers. And the eye test, when you see Deuce out there with the other starters, like we saw in the fourth quarter and for much of overtime last night, it just seems to work. He has a little bit of a quicker trigger on the offensive end. You could argue that he's been a better point of attack defender than Mikal Bridges this year. And you just don't have as many of the breakdowns on the defensive end that seems to occur again and again and again. Not saying that it's Bridges' fault. I actually don't think it is. But there is something about this five-man unit that is not clicking right now. Again, give it to the rest of the regular season. see if they could improve, but maybe something that you look again at in the offseason.
Something about that five-man unit, like you said, that needs to improve. And there's something about that stats or those numbers that you just brought up that a lot of people are going to take and they're going to run with, especially with what they gave up to Mikal Bridges. And more than anybody, Knicks fans do not have a full regular season of waiting to see and wanting to see what's going to happen with this team, especially a dude, again, you give up a lot. A lot is expected. So let's kind of break it down in a bigger way.
Sure.
6 games out of the All-Star break. They're 4-2. 3 of those wins were tight games against teams with losing records, and those 2 losses, as we know, were complete blowouts against the top teams in the East. Basketball fans outside of New York call this team average and overrated. Respond to that.
Well, I mean, again, I think there's some truth in both statements. Are they average? No, they're not average. They have 40 wins and 20 losses. They are one of 4 teams that could say that in the league right now. The other 3 teams, obviously Oklahoma City, Boston, and Cleveland, are in a class by themselves. And that's where you get to the second part of the statement. If you're going to call the Knicks a contender and you're going to try to put them on the level with those other 3 teams, then yeah, that would be overrating them. They are still a very good basketball team. And I think for me, if you're going to talk about how they went down 19 points to the Miami Heat last night, you also have to bring up the fact that they came back from being down 19 against a team that was coming off an impressive win, still a very well-coached team, a team that has a current All-Star in Tyler Hero, another guy who's made a bunch of All-Star teams in Bam Adebayo. Like, the Heat are not some kind of walkover, even though they're, traded Jimmy Butler having not the best season. I think there is an inconsistency with the Knicks this season that both fans of the team and people looking on from around the league maybe would have expected to have been smoothed out by now, considering we're already in March and it's still there. Look, they still have time. Maybe, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe they do make a change to the starting lineup in the regular season or maybe even in the playoffs. But considering how many issues they have had to work through, and considering the ups and downs, I think it says a lot about the character of this team, and I think it says a lot about what they're capable of, that they have managed to get to the record that they have. And again, this record is not all against bad teams. They've had a lot of quality wins, not the most highest quality wins, but they've beaten some good teams, and hopefully they could do that a few more times to instill some confidence around the league and in the fan base heading into the playoffs.
Got another big game against the Warriors Tuesday night, so all eyes are going to be on that. May have to call you on Wednesday, get you back on, and get your thoughts on that. So I appreciate you.
I'll be here, man. You know it.